Hello, welcome to SolariseCon, a day of global conversation on solarpunk, an art and activist movement, a subgenre of speculative fiction in which humanity has addressed climate change and made progress towards creating a more sustainable and equitable world. If I am muted and I'm just moving my lips, this is a good moment to comment this. My name is Pavel, your moderator for our third panel. Is solarpunk just another style? So, quick bio about me: I'm a hacker, a technologist, and open culture activist. 8 years ago, I got curious about why it's so hard to explain hackers' openness and community based technology to an average person, which led me to solarpunk and a huge appreciation for symbols and narratives in our culture. With me are our four wonderful panelists, and I'd like to ask each of them to introduce themselves to you. So, Jay.
Well, hi everyone. Thanks for coming to see us. My name is João Queiroz, also known as the worst nickname ever, Key1R0Z. So it's really hard to find me on Instagram. And I'm a Brazilian artist, illustrator. And in 2019, I created a project called Commando Futurism that mixes solar punk with Brazilian indigenous people's cultures and motives and a bit of cyberpunk. And that's it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Commando.
Hi, hello everyone.
And ni hao to the people streaming from China.
Exactly, and ciao to
the Politecnico di Torino. You're great.
So we are Guglielmo
and Laura.
We are the founders and most active members of the Commando Jugendstil, which is a solarpunk creative collective in which we do projects that embrace both fiction and transferring the solarpunk philosophy into real life by creating the projects, solarpunk projects with community from the ground up. And that's the way that we try to instill solarpunk and sustainability into communities around the world, specifically UK and Italy, because that's where we're based. Thank you.
Thank you. Dustin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dustin Jacobus. I'm a Belgian artist, an industrial design engineer. I have an interest in biomimicry, sustainable design, and futurism. I started my career as an illustrator for the textile industry and worked as a freelance designer. I was involved in numerous eco-design and open source hardware design projects, do-it-yourself design, open source manufacturing. But in the recent years, I started to focus more on storytelling, and I started to work on visual narratives about futurism. In 2020, I finished an art project called Universitas, in which I explore a futuristic world. In Universitas, I seek the nexus between creativity, science, and ecology. And at that same year, I collaborated with an American science fiction writer, Eric Hunting, who wrote a book about Solarpunk Post-Industrial Design and Aesthetics. It's also published in Italy by Future Fiction. And since then, and even years before, I explored how a solarpunk future might look like.
Thank you. So let me introduce our panel and set some foundation for our discussion. So in his essay, Innovation Starvation, Neil Stephenson defined a hieroglyph. It's a fully thought out picture of an alternate reality in which some innovation has taken place with full coherence and internal logic. It's a symbol, a visual language, and a narrative trope all at once, like Isaac Asimov robots or a cyberpunk or transhuman prosthetics. And we automatically know what kind of a story to expect, seeing a neon-filled city on a rainy night. And descriptions of societal inequality in a futuristic setting bring out very specific pictures to our mind. Solarpunk hasn't had a single masterpiece to set the tone and create such hieroglyphs yet. We don't have any such language. We are foraging for symbols, trying out aesthetics which don't always carry the meaning we would like them to. How to envision a truly sustainable city, paint the invisible connections between members of a small community, seamlessly include characters of different abilities and any ethnicity, it's clearly not enough to just slap a solar panel on top of a building. Many people came into Solarpunk after seeing a very specific yogurt ad and are questioning whether there's anything beyond the new rustic sci-fi aesthetics. Can we create something which will not be hijacked, not only used to greenwash? And I'd like to invite our well-accomplished artists to tell us about their perspectives. So the first question I would have for you is, what are you trying to convey with your Solarpunk art? And maybe Commando, would you like to start?
Yes, of course. So that's a really good question. Thank you. What we're trying to do with our art it has basically two purposes. So on one side, we're trying to help people when we do our work with the communities, with the local communities. We try to help them envision their sustainable future. So that's one of the things that we would like to show in our art. Like, we try to give shape and also push the boundaries a little to show what their sustainable future could be looking like. On the other hand, we also try to incorporate new technologies because, like, Laura is a scientist, so she is exposed to a high level of technology that me as an artist, even me as an artist, don't always have. So we get those notions and we try to
we try to depict what their applications in a Solarpunk society could look like. So in part, we challenge the communities we work with to go and imagine beyond what the hegemonic narrative can allows them. So the hegemonic narrative is like hyper individualism and consumerism and profit focused value system, etc. So we try to challenge them to look beyond this and see what the alternative possibilities are, and try to imagine themselves in the alternative possibility and what it could look like, and try to describe it or paint it or do a collage. And then, like, if their ability to draw is not quite enough, then we work with them and translate their ideas into art. So that was one of our projects last year, was actually to work with the community in Reading and draw a coherent picture of what they want their city to look like, going beyond capitalism, going beyond in an individualistic society, going beyond profit-driven society. So that's one of the things. So yeah, our art is community-based, I would say, and our art is sort of like a challenge to the imagination. Like, do you like this? Can you think something more? Can you push it even further? We like to be in dialogue with the communities we do art with.
Yeah, and this is also one of the reasons why our Solarpunk is so narrow, like in terms of timeline. So it just it's a future that could be happening tomorrow. Like, what could be happening if we all organize and decide to build a Solarpunk society starting from tomorrow or today. So this is also why our horizon time horizon is so close to us for the community-based work and for our fiction work.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can actually show your most community-focused pieces.
Yes.
So
yeah. So basically, what you can see here are two images that we did for
the
two
front cover of two magazines.
Yes, exactly. So they are both based in Spain. The one on the left is Mammoth magazine number 6, and the one on the right is Ecologia Politica. So the one on the left is basically a conversion, like a reconstruction of an abandoned place. in Barcelona, which
has an address, a specific address,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
we don't remember now, but it was a real place.
Exactly. So basically, we were imagining what could be done to convert an abandoned place into a landmark, a Solarpunk landmark for the local community. On the right, instead, there is it's an illustration that is a bit more symbolic. So it contains activists that are currently, fighting for their environmental causes. Like, for example,
there's an activist from Waorani Rebellion.
Exactly.
There is an artist from the No DAPL and Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
And a few historical figures hidden in there.
Yeah, exactly. And around them, there is like in Solarpunk, real Solarpunk innovations. So, for example, building 3D props from recycled materials and creating orange silk. So these are two innovations that are start from nature, and they can be done on a granular or diffuse based and they're also staying in an environment that is built with a specific solar technology, which is called solar concentrators
or solar waveguides. Depends. Yeah, exactly. Could be waveguides.
So these are like just two images to show what we.
Well, the point of both images is that communities work together to create Solarpunk futures.
Yeah.
And the Solarpunk futures are the ones that are adapted to the needs and desires of those communities.
Thank you so much. This is really, really great. You are able to show how community is like to really show communities in them. Jay, you want to say something?
Could I ask a quick question for Commando? Did you use that painting from Raphael, the School of Athens, as a reference?
Yeah, it's a cross between the School of Athens and the Quarto Stato, which is an Italian painting for the central people in the middle.
No, that's great. Yeah. That's great.
Yes, thanks. It's really great symbolically. So, Jay, would you like to answer this question? What are you trying to convey with your Solarpunk art?
Well, I wish I had like a very thought out and very cool response with a lot of theory behind, but I started it for many reasons, there's a bit like of trying to reclaim my identity as a descendant from indigenous people from in Brazil. There's also this side that I started kind of as a criticism to the sameness of cyberpunk, because we always see the same things in cyberpunk movies and games and mechanical arms and neon and it's always happening in some kind of megalopolis in Europe or Asia or North America, and but I'm doing it as I go in a sense, so at first I just wanted to bring cyberpunk closer to my home here in Brazil, so and this became like how could I imagine cyberpunk and then the nascent solarpunk movement in the third world, for example, how can we criticize and create like a counter narrative to like this mainstream narrative of sci-fi in general, and of course that can also expand to the economical sphere and the ideological sphere and relations between nation states and all this kind of stuff. So
if you allow me, I think this is a good moment to show how you started working into it. So start with two of your works, how you tried to change the blunt mechanical arms of Solarpunk into something much more Amazonian.
Because I said there's criticisms to be made to cyberpunk, but I'm a big fan of cyberpunk, you know, so I couldn't help myself but to slap on a mechanical arm wherever I go, in a sense. But there's questions that could be asked about that, you know, about transhumanism and what are the limits between like organic bodies and technological bodies, and if this kind of technologies would help create like class society in a sense, you know, not just from the rich and poor, but from the enhanced and not enhanced. That's basically the Deus Ex plot. But look, coming back to the question of why I make this kind of art, you know, because, you know, I want to create a kind of a cultural artifact, you know, that could be spread in a sense through in my culture and any culture that has access to it, to help, in a sense, create like a political movement, you know. But man, that's a really hard question. Sorry if I don't have like a very thorough response to this, but I want to engage politically and socially through the art, you know. And the first step to make that is to, like Commando said, to inspire people and help them see a new vision for the future, you know. So it's kind of planting a seed and see how it grows along the years and among all the other cultural artifacts. So yeah, I think to inspire and for people of color to see themselves in works of art and works of sci-fi that represent them as protagonists and makers of change, and not just like the other. That's always that usually they're represented as, you know. So sorry for the convoluted response, but that's basically it.
Don't worry. Thank you so much. And Dustin, could you tell us what are you trying to convey? And I feel that you will steer us straight into the next question.
Well, my answer corresponds with the answers of Commando and Joe. But for me, Solarpunk and my art is about storytelling. I think we highly need new narratives, and art is just a powerful medium to use if one wants to create new narratives. And if we talk about the future, then for me, we talk about tomorrow. The future starts tomorrow. For tomorrow, we need feasible and applicable solutions, things that are recognizable for people, things that help people to become positive about a rather grim future. They can empower people to act. So utopian images with lush green cities, flying cars, as a matter of speak, they can be nice, but people realize that it's a dream. I think we need realistic, futuristic scenarios, and scenarios that will be different depending on where you live and what your situation is. So social class, political situation, cultural background, and that's a reality that many of us are facing. We are facing the consequences of severe ecological disasters, recessions, social unrest, poverty, repression. That's unfortunately the start situation. And for me, this is how many Solarpunk scenarios start. But the hopeful thing is, and the powerful thing is, that Solarpunk tries to search for positive and realistic solutions, but without neglecting this reality. Solarpunk tries to envision a future in which people and communities have much more control about their lives, instead of some political and corporate elite that controls our society now. In any Solarpunk scenario, I think resilience is a keyword and very important. For me, also, in my art, also, Solarpunk tries to help us to become free from a more indoctrinated state and corporate propaganda. We have become a culture that is so obsessed with wealth, property, celebrity status, and so we are hyper-individualistic, and in order to maintain this control by an elitist class, we are constantly divided against each other. And I think Solarpunk can help to break this division between races, classes, gender, nationalities, because they are meant for one single purpose, and this further extraction of wealth and power. So we often are actually fighting against each other, and makes us incapable of finding consensus, and we grant powers to the ones who divide us, and we disempower ourselves, I think. So Solarpunk stories and art can help us to break this pathological modern culture with all its indoctrinations. Solarpunk can actually connect people instead of dividing them. But I think we can also talk about more and show more distant futures. It has its purpose. It can make people dream about something that's more distant, farther away, and we can show the transition, the different steps between now and a more distant future. So for me, it's tomorrow and a distant future and everything in between.
Thank you so much. And seeing your art, because I would actually like to show some of your works and how you are actually building this world in which we can join and work together, no matter genders, classes, and so on. I will zoom in a moment, but based on this, I would like to ask, how would you envision what does a Solarpunk city, village, and a community look like?
Well, for this one, it's actually maybe better, Pavel, if we would look at the other
first one, yes.
Because this is actually an illustration that I made quite recently for an architectural magazine, Era 21 from the Czech Republic. And what I try to do here is show the multiple stages of a Solarpunk city all in one picture. So it's maybe ideal to talk about it. And to start with, what you can see is that the surrounding landscape around the city has been turned into wilderness. So this brings us to a first aspect of a Solarpunk city. We can deconstruct, demolish all the infrastructure and buildings that are built in the hinterland of our cities. This leaves us with much more space that we can give back to nature. One can also see that the agricultural model changes, evolves together with the city. Around the city, you can see here that there's a new agricultural model where nature is much more integrated, a sustainable agricultural model with a large diversity of crops being cultivated, smaller farming plots with much more integrated nature. You can see that food forests are slowly becoming natural wild forests. What you can see also is that the contoured city has a new architectural form at its borders. It mimics here the terrace agricultural style that one can see in the Asian rice fields. It consists out of large platforms, pavilion structures stacked on each other, and they form large superstructures that can be adapted to whatever needs the city has. So the interior spaces are free to be used by the citizens. They can change it and adapt it to whatever their needs are and decorate and finish it. So this is why this superstructure is made here. The materials that are needed to do so are all modular in design, interchangeable, multifunctional. And this shows another aspect of a Solarpunk city: adaptability, modularity. Next in the city, you can also see the old city. It consists out of the gray-colored buildings, skyscrapers. We will inherit them from the past. And you can see the red rectangular structures. They are meant to show how existing structures can become connected. The old buildings are retrofitted, and the red grid that consists here out of many rectangular elements parasitize or consumes the old city. So much more space becomes available. You will have retrofitted old structures with new buildings, systems, and materials. You can see how nature deserves its place. You can see the river that's meandering through the landscape, a fluvial system that is allowed to flood after heavy rainfalls. You can see the large eco-bridge and corridors that help to guide animals through the city. And you can also see the linear city at the left, and you can see the linear city above the city as well. It's along transit lines that you have the same terraced platform structure. With inside, you'll have electrified train and rail systems hidden away in the core of the structure. And along this transit line, you can build heavy industries, renewable energy, workshops, shopping malls, theaters, hospitals. They will all be very easily accessible. At some places, you can also see that we have new architectural materials. This is for a more distant future, and material that has the ability to mimic natural structures, such as corals, for instance. This means the advent of a new smart carbon negative material, that actively can sequester carbon, and it can herald a new era of Solarpunk. And when we zoom in, it's maybe better to show the other illustration, Pavel. Yes. So this is one that I also made for the Institute for the Future, a book called Office Shock, written by Joseph Press. And it's a portrait style, but I also split it up so it's more easy to see the many details. The main idea here was for me to portray a building as if it's a tree. A tree is an entire ecosystem in itself. You have its canopy, its stem, its roots. They're all part of one amazing ecosystem. And together, many trees form a forest. So a city can be the same. A building can be an ecosystem on itself, and many buildings can form an urban ecosystem as well. And just like a tree has many functions, a building can have many functions as well. So you can see that the right zoomed in illustration that underneath the building is a recycling center. So people bring in used plastics, and the tree has a similar function. Along its roots, it pulls many nutrients out of the soil, recycled materials it can find in the soil. But in order to have them, it needs fungi and other critters that create those so desired nutrients. And a building can have the same role. Imagine that people come to collect and gather waste there, and plastic waste, for instance, and then you can have small tools such as shredders, extruders, injection molds, press machines. They can be used to process the plastics and waste and even create new health fabricates. So you can establish a new open source manufacturing workshops and create local workshops. It can lead to an enormous and unique collection of recycled and upcycled products. And this links with the idea of a tree and its fruits. A tree uses the nutrients to grow and the fruits and flowers. And in the same way, buildings can create new products. What you can also see is a lot of green and a lot of layers with different green, because it's not only meant for humans. The building is also covered with herbs, small shrubs, plants, flowers, even trees, and they can all be used by insects and other animals, birds and other species. So this is another aspect for me of the Solarpunk city. The human race is no longer to be seen as the superior race. Each building, each bridge, each road, each structure is designed to support as many species as possible. Each building tries to have a positive impact on its environment. And like you would have in a tree, you have the canopy with its leaves that catch light, and you have the photosynthesis process. The roof here does the same. It collects the sunlight with solar panels, and like a tree uses the water that falls next to the stem, the building can do the same. It can recycle water. So one can also see that the buildings are connected with each other. In the future, I think we can stop having those arbitrary boundaries between private and public spaces. And at the ground, you can see that the roads are given back to the public, so they can be used for social activities instead of polluting cars. So
thank you. Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask, because we are already at the half point, and there's so much more to show everybody. Commando, would you like to share how do you see communities, cities, villages? And this is a good moment to show the second of your slides.
Yes, yeah, it would be great. So yeah, those two are more based on kind of a fiction approach, fiction style, that as we started, not from a community building point of view, like from real examples, but we imagine how our Solarpunk aesthetics could be applied to
the reuse of terrible, horrible, no good things for an actual good purpose.
Exactly. So on the left, you've got a Solarpunk conversion of an oil drilling plant.
Oil rig.
Oil rig, yes. And on the right, you've got an illustration that is called the first flight of the Argo, which is basically combining a new flying technology that is a blimp powered through solar sails and a specific technology of
yeah, it's got, well, it's a blimp, so it floats by itself, but it has like an engine, and the engine is powered by hydrogen production using sunlight and seawater, which is something that at the moment is very specialized. And there are a few groups that have made anti-corrosion electrodes, which can work with salt water, because at the moment hydrogen production relies on fresh water, which is, as Emilio said in the previous panel, it's a source of conflict, because it's being used by industrial processes. It needs to be used for people and for agriculture. But salt water, nobody cares. There's so much of it, and it can't be used for any of those things. But if you can do the hydrogen dismutation of salt water, then you have like a free source of energy using sunlight. So yeah, sorry, long digression, scientist.
Yeah, so basically next to the Argo, there is also the vitamin C, which is a converted
aircraft carrier.
Yeah, exactly, aircraft carrier. Yeah, so basically we're imagining that possibly in a Solarpunk future, aircraft carrier, which are, they can no longer be used for war,
because no war, and
exactly.
Also no nuclear powers to run them.
To run them, yeah. So maybe they could become a floating island that can produce fruit that can be, either given to the people that needs, or just like used as a basis for people that wants to create commerce around this kind of like
sort of like a floating stopover point for like merchant ships, or like a floating research station for ocean health and like those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. So basically it's just like this is like one of the questions that we often ask ourselves, like how can we reuse structures that are currently used for consumption of our planet, for example, or as we were saying, like creating more divisions between humans that are just like sitting in different parts of the world. How can we convert these structures into something that is actually useful and creates value, cultural and human value for people? And these are just like two of the answers that we gave ourselves.
Yeah, the question was about community, and we talked about something else. But like, yeah, the way we see community in Solarpunk art, we think that communities are in 90% of the cases the center of our art. This is more conceptual and it's more about reusing. But communities, as was discussed in the previous 2 panels, communities are like the engine of change. At this stage, we can't really expect our institutions to do non-hegemonic things, because the institutions are fully captured by the hegemonic narrative. So, but communities realize that this is untenable, that we can't go ahead with the current system and hope to be alive at the end of like the next century, essentially, as you know. So communities are at the center of what can be done, and they are at the center of our art. And like communities and the commons, I would say.
Yeah, we always try to think about approaches that can be implemented from the ground up. So what the community can do independently and with fewer resources, or what could be happening, like, for example, in our stories, not in just in our illustrations, we ask ourselves and we try to find the answers to the questions like, what can a community that maybe finds together around some people that, what could be happening if people gets around and share the knowledge? For example, we've got a scientist, we've got other people that specialize in other kind of knowledge, and what could be happening, what could be the shape of a community that uses all this shared knowledge to create something for that benefits all of them.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask the same question to Jay, and I wanted to actually use your perspective to get us into the next question, because I see that for you it will be connected. So first, what does a Solarpunk city, village, and the community look like for you? And since we know that you created or you're heavily contributing to Amazonian futurism, what does how does Solarpunk aesthetic allow us to re-envision localized future with the example of your work?
First, I wish I had like the technical knowledge that Dustin showed and Commando showed. I think that's something that really enriches their work. To have like this scientific basis, and from that, they can create a design based on like maybe near future solutions or already existing solutions. So I think that's really it's really great to have in the work. And but usually my main goal is to capture people emotionally, in a sense, and basically people that have like they have a liking for Solarpunk or climate fiction, and also people of color that want to see themselves represented on their work, right? So
if you allow me, maybe I will show the second of your works right now.
Please. Yeah. So when I started creating like my Solarpunk illustrations and Mesofuturism illustrations, I had some vague idea about how that world would look like, but I didn't have like a great design for it, And so I can tell you, for example, that I can imagine a city, especially in the Amazon region, to have transport made transport by river, and to have like this kind of, like Commando said, like this city that's based around the community living, that mimics how usually indigenous communities how the day-to-day goes, right? Because the community live is very strong in that sense. And but I can tell you about the nitty gritty of how that city would work, because I'm still trying to discover that, to imagine how, for example, the Brazilian region, the Brazilian continent, South America in a whole would, how that future would look like, because will we have like localized like Solarpunk cities, regions, or nations, and some other regions would be like more cyberpunk style, more that there's something that looks more like a dystopia. And how would climate change affect these regions? So an idea that I have, for example, inside this. Inside this future will be like these indigenous communities and these indigenous metropolis would actively be fighting against the desertification of the Amazon. That's something that's beginning to happen right now, because of all the burnings to create pastures that's been happening here in Brazil. So I can imagine like some kind of I don't think terraforming is the right word, but some kind of climate engineering to help fight against the deforestation and desertification and so on. And also something that I also have been considering in my work, because the Amazon region is not only inhabited by indigenous peoples and indigenous communities and indigenous descendants. There's a whole array of cultures. There are a lot of quilombos. That's a word that we use here. That's these communities that many of them are from descendant of slaves. There are also what we call ribeirinhos, that are people that live on the edges of the rivers, and some of them have like floating houses, and they have this whole nomadic lifestyle. Some of them have, some of them don't have that. And there's also like how life looks in the maybe in the slums of the metropolis, you know. So and as futurism starts like this more indigenous focus, you know, but that's something that can be more like regional. So and inside that, we don't necessarily have to have only like optimistic stories and like utopic visions of the future, you know, because, for example, if I'm trying to write a story inside that universe, how can I create like an interesting story without some kind of conflict, you know? So would we have like an external threat to this like ideal society, or would we have like internal struggles from different factions inside it? And so, you know, how it's really important to have like this balance, I think, of like have an idealistic vision, but also see that not everything inside it will be perfect, you know. Of course, if I want to just focus on the illustrations, I could create like all kinds of utopia, but they'll serve more like as propaganda posters in a sense, for a good cause, of course, you know. But if I'm trying to create a narrative inside it, and talking a bit about the hieroglyphs, you know, to create like an opus on a work based on that, I think we have to bring like this Solarpunk sense more like to a reality, in a sense, like how these different factions would struggle, what kind of power struggles would we have within, you know, what kind of problems with technology happen, what level of technology would the society have, and this kind of stuff, you know. So coming back to your question, I have this vague sense of how that city would look like. Of course, it would be community based, and would have clean energy, and it will work around this concept of having of the separation between humanity and nature not existing anymore, you know. So it would be like in Dustin's work, the city wouldn't only be made for humans, but other species around the region, and to you know, yeah. That's it. Sorry if I can have like give you like a very structured answer about that, but you know, I'm an illustrator, man. You know, I'm not a scientist, so I'm kind of out there.
It's great to hear ideation and hear you brainstorming, coming up with ideas. And I wanted to jump from that. And since you mentioned those hieroglyphs and both localized futures, both realistic Solarpunk with conflicts, with problems, and how to create symbols to talk about it, not to go straight into dystopia. I think I would like to ask Dustin. Do you see how we can create any such symbols to talk about problems we may have, to talk about localized problems and localized futures? Not only in a perfect world where the evil was vanquished, the good has won, everything is purely sustainable, but a realistic path to a better world.
Yes, but I think there are definitely some symbols that I think that are typically Solarpunk for me, and that can be portrayed in Solarpunk or shown. An obvious one is everything that reminds us of the fossil fuel era. there will be, I think, a faint memory in the solarpunk world. So this means cars, aeroplanes, fossil fuel powered cargo boats, and all power related technology that needed fossil fuels, and basically also all infrastructure that needed to support all this fossil fuel tech. And typical symbols of that fossil fuel era are roads, airports, parkings, the dispersed suburban settlements with long distances between houses and places where we work. And there's a secondary chain of crude oil products, such as chemicals and plastics, that will in the long term become obsolete. So new symbols will be more natural materials, recycled and upcycled materials. And then on a small scale, I think you can very symbolic will be an eclectic aesthetics that's very rich in a variety of upcycled designs. And on a larger scale, you could see it on an urban level then. You could see many retrofitted and repurposed old buildings, multifunctional in design, adapted to the needs that one has on that particular moment. So basically a quirky patchwork of unique retrofitted, repurposed buildings. And of course, definitely green, but I would say that symbolic for Solarpunk, it's not only trees and plants. I think it would have a much deeper consciousness about nature, more respect for nature. It gives priority to nature, not only planting trees on some new available open space. No, it tries to help to create better circumstances for nature to do its thing. So this goes hand in hand with an entire civilization that has a much deeper and more respectful understanding of what nature is and what it can mean, a more humble position perhaps, and perhaps a stronger spiritual relation with nature. Something that actually was present in many ancient cultures and religions and tribes all over the world, but it got lost during our industrial age. So I think that this also would be reflected in the symbols of a Solarpunk world.
Thank you so much. Commando, would you like to take the same question?
Yeah, it's great, even though it's a very complicated question. But listening to Dustin and to Joao just like highlighted some sparks into our ideas.
Made our two neurons spark together.
Yeah, exactly. So it's difficult because like some of the things that you want to describe in a solarpunk society are very abstract. So it's difficult to find a concrete shape to define them. But like, definitely one of the things that keeps popping up in our work is the importance of the community. So the people, how people organize themselves and interact with the space that is around them. And speaking about the more respect about like for nature and as Dustin was saying, the role of nature. Like recently in an event that we participated into in Italy, we were talking about the concept of the city as an organism. So like detaching
those city metabolisms apparently is actually a field of study in sustainability. What's the name of the guy? The guy with the dog was talking about
right,
it.
Yes,
Sebastian.
Sebastian. Well,
so
anyway,
when you come up with it, you can paste it in our chat.
In the chat, but yeah, there was a researcher from University of Milano Bicocca who studies city metabolism and like how you can make cities sustainable by controlling and like changing the flows of information, materials, energy, and waste that go in and out of the city. And the waste is like a large component of like, we should waste a lot less. A lot of like the stuff that we need basically ends up in landfill. And at this stage, there are even people thinking about mining landfill for like resources. So yeah.
Yeah, so basically instead of like seeing human or a certain portion of the human of the humans as the the entity that basically keeps in check everything else into that is present in our world, starting to envision the city and the structures that are around people as an organism. So basically, we see ourselves as part of something, and we like the space that with which we interact reflects the fact that we give and take from our space in a communal relationship. I don't know if that was clear, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to go from here. We already got a few nice questions, but before that, I wanted to ask you the famous, infamous yogurt ad. Do you believe that there is any way we can create either directly our own art or some symbols that will propagate further, that will not be co-opted into some capitalist movement and will not be used to greenwash something which doesn't align with Solarpunk? And maybe I would like to ask Dustin first.
Well, I think that's definitely challenging. Capitalists or many other groups can use art in their own narrative to tell their own stories, and that is something to be aware of. I think as an artist, you should always be very cautious when it comes to collaborating with others, but it is sometimes very difficult to find out hidden agendas. I think it's a truth that corporations are definitely screening any trend. They are trying to understand and seek how they can commodify it. They make a market for it. That's actually what the capitalist machine is very good at. They can even, as a matter of speech, commodify its own protest movements against capitalism. So as an artist, I think one can try to screen and find out the intentions behind others and what they want to do with your work, but it's not always easy, and mistakes are made very fast, especially I think because artists are also depending financially on their work. So an artist has to live and eat, but I think it's a basic rule where there's a lot of money, chances are high that the intentions are not always in line with what Solarpunk tries to portray. For me personally, I have other ways to gain money, so it gives me some degree of freedom. I am less depending on financial return, so I can refuse more easily work, but that's not the case for everybody. The downside is I have less time to focus only on Solarpunk scenarios. I also always try to have a more independent position. I always say to the people that I collaborate with, I want to use my art for my own stories as well. So because I have control about what I can bring forth with my illustration work. And the worst thing that can happen is that one of my art pieces is used in another narrative as well. But I think in the days of internet, art is so easy to recycle art and to use it in another story. It's difficult also for an individual artist, I think, to defend themselves against it. But as a movement, as a Solarpunk movement that shares the same values, I think it's more easier to guard them. We can, as a movement, boycott others that have very bad behavior with the art that we created. But I think maybe for me personally, one of the most important things is that as an artist, or as artists, we should keep focusing on the story itself. And even, you could say the brand Solarpunk, I'm less attached to the brand name itself. For me, the name on the cat does not really matter. It's the story that matters. It's something that's behind it, because actually we should keep working collectively on the key aspects of this resilient future and its scenarios. And just like the corporate world is very good in using marketing to reinvent itself again and again and again, even after the most worst scandals or atrocities, they are capable to reinvent themselves and rebrand themselves. But actually what they do is they change the clothes and the colors and the style, but in essence, they keep telling the same story. And we could do this as well, even if malicious movements or profit-driven businesses misuse Solarpunk. We could actually, if we focus on the key stories behind it, reinvent ourselves as easy. And I think that's important.
Thank you. And Commando, would you have anything to add, any other perspective on how we can avoid greenwashing, how we can prepare when we see our ad in some capitalist place that we may not have wanted to see it there?
Yeah, that's difficult, as as Dustin was pointing out. Like if if there's anybody that wants to make money out of like somebody's art, they'll find a way, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of creators in the last period that had like they literally stopped creating because their art kept on getting stolen for mischievous purposes.
Yeah, exactly. And but maybe one of the things, like if there's anything that we can add, is maybe like following the example of what, for example, Joao is doing, like making art that is extremely grounded into the local the local network. I don't know exactly what to say. Like make a Solarpunk that is extremely local, so is like enforced by the community that is behind it, because that community believes in the values of that art. So like it's emblematic that we have like people from different parts of the world in this panel as well, because everybody is giving their own sensibility and their own experience from their local background into the Solarpunk world.
Yeah, and in a way that's protective, because capitalism relies on global narratives, right? Everything is kind of same-ish. The McDonald's is the same McDonald's everywhere, and there's like this sameness and predictability and like uniformity, which and sort of like the uniformity of an industrial product. All the industrial products of the same line, of the same factory, the same make and model will be the same. That they are expected to be the same, right? So an art style that deals in the sameness, in the same uniformity, I guess is more co-optable, because you literally have to just like make more of the same. That's why the sameness of, for example, steampunk or cyberpunk is kind of like easier to co-opt to some kind of narratives, because the language, I guess, is easier to capture. So if Solarpunk has some intrinsic principles which are communal, but then the declinations of like what's best for each bioregion of each cultural region, or each intersection of bioregion and cultural region is unique. You can have like Solarpunkness, but it's not going to be immediately easy to appropriate, because it's also going to be more niche in a way. You can't sell it in Beijing and then sell it in Copenhagen the same way, because it's grounded in something which is not immediately capturable, I guess.
Thank you so much. And Jay, do you have anything to add on top of that, especially given you created such a unique style? You're muted.
I'm almost closed my window. Sorry. Futurism, of course, is more focused on the Brazilian region, but inside of that, the Amazon itself is a universe. In Brazil, there are more than 300 different indigenous peoples with many languages and many cultural differences. So, and besides all the groups that I talked to you guys about that also live in the Amazonian region, and so as an artist, it's really kind of hard, just like Commando said, just like Dustin said. And I also have to eat, and I also have to pay my rent and stuff like that, and so there has to be some kind of balance, even if another future is something more localized. I already did works for like Facebook, Twitter, HP, Natura, which is it's a major cosmetics brand here in Brazil, and but I always try to make work that that at least I think that will have some kind of good social impact, So, for example, in this work that I did for the Natura, they're asked some illustrations from me that would help like promote this idea of the circular economy, you know, because that's something that's part of the whole brand. And but for example, there are some works that I had to refuse to make them. For example, like some kind of fast fashion online shop tried to get my work, you know. So I thought about it a bit, and I refused to do any work for them. And there's also, for example, what happened with the London Science Museum, you know, because of all the sponsorship made by the Adani Group, that in the end, I refused to exhibit one of my works there, because but I'm not a saint, you know. I'm not like this immaculate artist that, you know, my work is not co-opted by any way by any kind of capitalist movement, you know. And something, if you're going back to that idea of the hieroglyph, you know, if you want to create something like a magnum opus of Solarpunk that will help like create this vision that people will immediately think of when we say the word Solarpunk, there has to be some kind of work that has some mass appeal, right? For example, in Cyberpunk, there's a Blade Runner, and there's all these sorts of games, and to have that kind of work, to have this kind of reach, to reach so many people, there will have to be some compromise with the capitalist system, even if we don't want that, you know. So, and of course, the message behind Solarpunk cannot be so modified that becomes something else, right? So it has to be like this middle way, and something that will appeal to the masses. So these people will have like this cultural artifact in their imaginations that will help in the future to shape their political beliefs and create and make real change in the world. But this work cannot be like a completely bastardized version of Solarpunk that's, you know, put on a McDonald's commercial or some coal mining operation, you know, so just so they can look green, even if they're not near it, right? So
I always wondered, what if we took another approach, and instead of agreeing to start changing Solarpunk, we just crowdfunded it? Because I think with artists such as you, like, I'm not proposing it right now, but if you were to pool your resources, pool all the expertise, pool all your ability, if you were to go to some crowdfunding platform and say that you want to create some short album, comic, or anything like that, I think you would be quite likely to actually get some support. But we have quite a few questions, so maybe let's just wrap up our first part with just one question, and I would like you to answer with just 2 to 3 sentences. Do you believe that Solarpunk is more than just an art style? And if so, what makes it more than just an art style? And Commando, if I could ask you to start.
Yeah, you want to go for it?
Yeah, I mean, we think that Solarpunk is more like a praxis, is like a method which is applied to stories, real life projects, pieces of art, pieces of design, architecture, clothes design of various kinds.
Yep.
So it's a method that incorporates the listening to the needs, the community-based approaches, and the attention to local climatic, cultural, and bioregional specificities, like how much it rains, how much sun there is.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Thank you. And Dustin, what do you think? Is Solarpunk just an art style? If yes, why? If no, what makes it not just a style?
But I don't think so. For me, it clearly starts as a cry for an answer on a more dystopian narrative that you see in a lot of media, games, television series, and so it's not something that comes from the art world in itself. But yeah, people that seek answers feel appeal to art. But if you, for instance, would insert the hashtag Solarpunk in Instagram, you would directly see that it's not only art, it's also people making clothes, architects, academic people that are hashtagging their work as Solarpunk. So that I think says it all. It's more than only an art movement.
Thank you so much. And Jay, to wrap up, what do you think?
Well, that will sound a bit mystical, but it's something that, like Commando said, like Solarpunk is kind of the way. It just felt like a kung fu movie right now. But I think this is something that's being constructed, right? So, for example, Solarpunk doesn't have to be like only based on Art Nouveau style, right? So, for example, if the community, in a sense, fight some criticism of this certain style, this any kind of aspect of the Solarpunk thing that we're building, that can change. So Solarpunk, like in 15 years, can look like something else, and that also change like. The politics behind it and the economical system behind it. So it's something that's being built at the moment, So when something criticizes something in Solarpunk, that is also part of the movement itself. So yeah, Solarpunk is the way, man.
Thank you so much. So thank you for the first part, and we already have a few questions. I see that we already have one because we did some false advertising. We promised talking about fashion, and we haven't brought it up. So maybe let's focus a little more on Solarpunk fashion. One symbol lost with industrial age is clothing we wear. A lot of clothing is cheaply mass-produced when we used to display our communities symbolically through our clothing. So, who would like to start with this one? Essentially, how do you imagine Solarpunk fashion? How do you imagine clothing in Solarpunk? How to make something sustainable so it's not just fast fashion that you change every few weeks, but clothing as something more in line with you, your community.
One of the things that we can say about it is like, I mean, right out of the bat, I don't have a clear idea of what actually the shape of the clothes could be. But one of the points that we discussed, in the past, was
during the projects that we made as
yeah,
well.
exactly, was like how does the clothes are being produced and designed. So that is something that could be addressed in Solarpunk society. Like, for example, well, there was also like a reference to this in one of our illustrations when we were talking about orange silk, for example,
which is made from the
orange peel.
Orange peel, yeah. It's like, or from leftover bits of orange that were used to make juice. Is the orange is actually utilized, I think.
So one of the things that you can say is like, how do we construct the clothing? Like, where do we get the raw materials? Like, can we make a clothing system that is sustainable and it is also using recycled materials? What can we do to transfer the responsibility of like creating clothes from the places in the world that we are now exploiting for it back into our
relocalizing.
Yeah, exactly.
To relocalize the clothing industry, to make it not wasteful, and like to use materials which are local as well and appropriate to the climate and how much it rains, etc.
Or how can we distribute and the designs, for example, among our communities, like, or how can we share knowledge about, how we can build clothes, because we probably don't know like how to make a pair of pants. For example, my grandmother was a tailor, so there has been knowledge that has been lost, but it was there. So maybe I don't have a clear answer in terms of like the shape, but these may be the questions.
They were definitely repaired clothes
exactly.
and repurposed. And your grandmother's stuff, like, made new, like, you recut it and reshape it and Frankenstein it with something else, and then it's your grandmother's dress, but it's also super new.
Awesome. Thank you. Jay, Dustin, would you like to add anything?
Well, yeah. Well, I think it's the same as with so many of our consumer goods. I think our creativity is somehow suppressed by the state and market since ages. For a long time, we are all made entirely dependent on multinational corporations, and they give us something in return. They give us millions of cheap versions of a lot of often the same products that they want to sell us, and as many as possible. And all colors, all sorts of styles, and you can find them in any village, any city. So an enormous amount of products that can be found everywhere, but it comes with a price of mass pollution and exploitation. And I think the moment we have more control about our supply chain and how the way we produce stuff, an effect that will be that it will have is that perhaps the variety of all these colors and all these different materials will be less spectacular, but we can go towards more ecological, more locally designed products that are much more sustainable, made to last for a lot longer period, that can be more easily repaired, and it can be the same with clothes. So thinking about production processes and materials that can be produced on a local scale, and that will depend on where you live.
Thank you. And Jay, would you like to add anything, or should we go to the next question?
Yeah, I think that would basically follow like some principles, some maybe something that's built to last, something that doesn't hurt the planet, the ecosystem in the process, something that is made from something that doesn't need to be shipped from another continent. And if we go to more speculative fiction, we can think about, like, I don't know, through biotechnology, there algae or some kind of fungi or some kind of plant that can be grown in a lab. And from that, you can make like clothing from that. And that clothing, when it comes back to the earth, it actually helps bring back nutrients to the earth. So, so it's wholly circular. And culturally, that can represent the people, that sometimes is not mass produced. So it will reflect like the culture from people from the Andes, or some people from North America, or another third world country, So it's basically that,
Thank you so much. And Dustin, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, well, what I also think is one of the positive things, if we would move towards a society where we have much more control about production, is that we can make use of the enormous creative potential of people, of makers everywhere. The same people that are working in those gigantic factories can create an enormous amount of creative clothes that we would have never seen before. So that's also actually unique designs, something that to take into account.
Thank you so much. I really like the idea of having like a distributed see like network of maker spaces or essentially tailor shops where you can get inspired or see designs from all around the world and create them with your local.
It really connects with the idea of, like Art Nouveau and arts and crafts. That's something that was going against the Industrial Revolution. So they come back to this artisanship. So it really ties in with that idea.
Yeah. So I wanted to, we have a lot of questions. So I wanted to go with one specifically for Dustin. There's just out of curiosity, when you try to mimic the organic styles of the city, do you consider problematic notions of humid green environments such as mosquitoes, parasites, etc.?
Yeah, well, I didn't think about that particular problem, but I think part of understanding nature much better is also dealing with pests and dealing with all sorts of animals and plants and things that have for us a negative effect. But the moment you understand nature better, you can find also natural solutions for things that have become out of balance, and perhaps there can be something done with the mosquito problem if you think in that way too.
Yeah, I think we have quite a lot of actually maker spaces looking into it. So I don't remember the details, but I think even Omnicommons in Oakland was working on this, and they were working on fully organic, essentially UV filters, so that we wouldn't have problems with putting too many chemicals in the water when applying UV filters. So thank you for that. Would you like to add anything, or can we just can we jump to another question?
Yeah, I really I didn't stop to think about all these poor people inside all these buildings full of green, and all the mosquitoes and kind of things that will be like bugging them. So that's really something to consider, But like Dustin said, maybe there's some solution to that, using biotechnology, nanotechnology, or just, creating a optimal environment that doesn't become a problem. But at the same time, has to welcome other species, right?
I like that even the book Ecotopia that was created in the 70s created this beautiful tagline, yours is the world of physics and chemistry, ours is the world of biology and looking for biological solutions. And I think this applies pretty well. I have one interesting one, and this is, as a disabled person, what drew me to cyberpunk was the normalized use of advanced prosthetics replacing faulty limbs. How could that be done or seen in Solarpunk? And I don't know who would like to take that or start.
Well, that's basically the problem that's presented on the plot of Deus Ex Human Revolution, right? So the year is 2033, something like that. And advanced prosthetics have been advancing, So on one side, these massive corporations are helping people, disabled people, maybe they have lost a limb, they lost an eye, their side, something like that. But at the same time, they're making these people dependent on one drug that prevents their body from rejecting that. But also, this technology that is helping people is also being used to keep the power system in place. So a disabled person can have like a defense prosthetic, but also a police officer can have that. So I think maybe some kind of government regulation, something that's sponsored by the state, maybe that is highly regulated, but it's given free to people that really need it, but it's controlled so it doesn't get out of hand and can be used for nefarious purposes.
And okay, Commando.
There is also another aspect, which is like cities and workspaces and structures nowadays are not designed with people with disabilities in mind. So the option is I have to think about ways to make the disabled people able to use a thing which is not designed for them. I think like Solarpunk design could maybe focus on how can I design this space, this city, to be inclusive of people with additional needs, with different needs, like with neurodivergency, with wheelchairs, without the ability to see very well or to see at all, without the ability to communicate verbally. Like there are a few interesting articles which I remember seeing in various places, in various like different online magazines, about redesigning places to include, instead of like designing technology to make the disabled people able to use something which is not designed for them.
Yeah, and there is also like, this is actually one of the things that we wanted to address in one of the projects that we did for Reading, because we were writing a book about the Reading of the future, and we were trying to also include the perspective of disabled people. So we made a session in which we collected ideas from the disabled community of Reading, and so specifically for that point, to see how they are imagining their Solarpunk sustainable future.
And that like is also a future which gives them the option to have a prosthetic paid by the NHS or paid by the community, or like if they don't have to go in debt to have something exactly that is required for their life.
This also ties up with the other thing that I wanted to say very briefly, is that if I think about, I'll say, traditional kind of science fiction now, or cyberpunk science fiction, a disabled person that has prosthetics is often categorized as a citizen of a lower layer, of a lower,
second class.
Second class, exactly. So having a disability in some way, or not having it in some way, just like creates even like a kind of like distinction in a way that the society is built, even if it's a fictional society. So one of the things that maybe Solarpunk can do is stop thinking in these terms, like instead of
appreciating body uniqueness and neurodivergency, exactly, and just like as normal facts of life, and making sure everybody has a dignified life.
Yeah. So not just
with their needs met.
So not just like on the aesthetic side of things, but also on the approach, on how we approach the narratives of disabled people.
And like the needs of someone might be a prosthetic, and the needs of someone else might be. There was a story about this person who had a form of dwarfism that wanted a lectern to go to university and talk to them, but they wanted a lectern their size. They didn't want like a thing to raise them to the height for the lectern that already existed. That's the lectern thing.
Thank you so much. And Jay, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, no, just thought that, coming back to the artisanship idea and localizing production, in a fictional future, we could think about like decentralizing the production of limb replacements and prosthetics, by having like the blueprints being freely available on the internet, and people can 3D print that, with local materials, and from that they can add their own uniqueness based on the local, on the region that they live in. So for example, someone that lives in the Amazonian region, we'll make some kind of adaptation to these limbs and make it readily available on the internet. And someone that lives on like Milan, we have another use for replacement, so, and that could be freely shared between people, and that also, of course, make it way cheaper and accessible for people that really need it.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes left, and I wanted to build on the narrative that Laura you mentioned the morphological freedom, how transhumanists call it. So essentially, you decide what is the shape of your body. And Dustin, in your art, you showed people without prosthetics, without like there were people that were disabled. So does this build on how you see disabled people within Solarpunk society or community?
Well, a good question. But I think for me, it's important and too much neglected. I think a city is too often designed from a perspective of a privileged, white, non-disabled male perspective. Actually, as myself, and I have to admit, I always think in a certain way that possibly differs from somebody with other features than mine. A disabled person or somebody, a woman, actually even a woman, looks at different at the city, and I try to start to take this into account when I draw. But I actually would encourage many other people to collaborate and to criticize to my art and to give them to have their own voice, because I think they are best suited to see what's missing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think that there's one more thing that we could add. I actually have a tiny bit of computational neuroscience knowledge. So I worked on some prosthetics, and I can tell you that as in our first panel we mentioned, there's a lot of technology we can create to match the needs of people. As you said, prosthetics can be created locally, but also prosthetics can be created not only to help people like be more normalized and look like an able-bodied person, but they can be also made much more cheaply for very specific purposes. So if you need a yoga prosthetic just to be able to do some yoga position, you can do that. If you need something that is much simpler, cheaper to make, I know that in real life we have prosthetics that can be made for like $30 to $100 that are not as good as the $50,000 one, but you can make them in your local makerspace, and it will serve you for your specific purpose. So we already have this technology, we already have this notion, and we can also include that in our culture, include that in the worlds we are envisioning. So we have 3 minutes left. I think we won't have time for any more questions. So I would like to thank you all. This was a wonderful panel. I would like to additionally thank Commando, who created all the art that we are using here and our background, our poster. So thank you very much. It's been an honor. And I will post the links to your portfolios within the channel description after this call. So thank you very much. If you have anything to add, this is your last chance.
I just want to say thank you, really. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and to meet other people that does Solarpunk art and to participate as a guest to this incredible event with these incredible people. Thank you very much.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Okay.
And,
To keep it short, let's keep building Solarpunk, and let's keep bettering it day by day, and we'll create a better future with that. It all starts with art, but it can have lots of ramifications. See ya.
And from my side too, thank you very much. I'm very grateful that I could participate in this lovely, great discussion. And I would say the same, keep on collaborating and contributing to the Solarpunk narrative.